what James Franklin just revealed about Drew Allar is going to have a major impact on how the quarterback plays this season.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football, and as always, thank you so much for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Zach Sako, and I'm your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. Isn't it great to just have something tangible to talk about? Headlines, information that we can discuss, analyze, and that's what we're doing here with Big Ten Media Days, but it was what was said at Big Ten Media Days as James Franklin revealed something worth noting about Drew Allar that's going to impact this offense in a strong way. It's going to make this offense even better with Andy Kotelnicki at the helm for the second year in a row. We're also going to talk about Penn State getting fantastic news, sharing fantastic news on the NIL front, plus some other takeaways about Big Ten Media Day with Penn State's appearance that you do not want to miss out on towards the end of the show, starting with Drew Allar. So let's set things up here. James goes on Colin Cowherd's show, and Colin's asking him about Drew, and he says that he's the number one overall pick, or at least has the potential to be in a future NFL draft, and laid out all these different skills that he likes about him, and just asked James, what is something that really makes Drew a strong quarterback, or how he's improved going into this season? And James said, well, he's dropped 10 pounds and he's much more athletic. That is huge for Penn State because we saw it a little bit last year. How Allar wasn't a dual threat, but he could use his legs. He could maneuver. He was not afraid to run the football more. That first year starting, more that statue-esque quarterback. And James Franklin pointed that out. Quarterbacks in this day and age have to have an element of mobility. I said that years ago. When Andrew Luck and Robert Griffin III went into the NFL, I said, I don't know that you're going to have the Tom Bradys, the Peyton Mannings, the Drew Breeses playing quarterback for much longer, having that be the type of QB that you can build your team around. So how do you adapt your game? If you're Allar, you lose the weight and you become more of a dual threat. Is he Lamar Jackson? No, that's something that James Franklin has kind of always prefaced when having these conversations about Allar. But losing that weight means that Allar does become more of a serious dual threat, that you are going to have to respect his legs, that this is another wrinkle that you can put into Andy Kotelnicki's system in addition to throwing the ball to a variety of different wide receivers in Trevor Pena, Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross. Three tight ends that you can rely on between Luke Reynolds, Khalil Dinkins, Andrew Rapplier. You're going to have Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen involved in the passing game. But now the running game gets a little even more complex. Imagine a situation where Allar, the defensive end, has to stay poised, disciplined, because Allar might run the ball for 15 to 20 yards. And you're not expecting it because you got to account for Singleton and Allen. So to me, Allar going from close to 245 pounds down to 235, as James had said, that is a big deal because it opens up another part of the playbook for Penn State. It makes this offense even more difficult to stop. It forces defenses to respect Drew Allar in another way, which opens up it's going to open up other areas of the playbook just because Drew Allar does lose 5 to 10 pounds here. He's down to 235. James Franklin's on the record for that. So he will be faster. He will be quicker. He's not going to be Lamar Jackson. He's not going to be, I mentioned Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck was fairly quick for a mobile quarterback. He wasn't the fastest, but Drew Allar does not need to have that degree of athleticism to be effective as a runner. And Allar showed in the past that he's not really that statue that some people make him out to be, that he can't move, he can't maneuver. That's just not true. It's not true in the slightest. Even his first year starting, you look back at the film, you watch those games, you watch the tape. Allar is extremely difficult to bring down within the pocket. That's one of Allar's better skills, is being able to maneuver, avoid pass rushers. So if you give him an extra gear on his straight line speed, just makes him an all-around better quarterback. And as James Franklin admitted, you need that in this day and age of football. It's not just about college football. It's not just about pro football. It is across the board where your quarterback needs to be able to pick up, honestly, even more than just 5 yards, where you kind of have to get into somewhat of a foot race. Allar's not going to be the fastest player on the football field at any given time, but he's certainly someone you're going to have to account for with everything that I just laid out here. And again, this is year 2 of Andy Kotelnicki's offense, meaning that Kotelnicki understands Allar's strengths much better and the weaknesses too. Allar's not a perfect quarterback. He has weaknesses, but Kotelnicki now understands how to maximize Allar in this offense and to get the football to the best players in any given situation. And you have that with this trio of veteran wide receivers. I think something else that James Franklin pointed out, because we're on this topic of how this benefits Allar, is Trevor Pena was a captain at Syracuse. Kyron Hudson was a captain at USC. Devontae Ross has played a ton of college football as well. Okay, well, it was at Troy. It's group of 5. Okay, he's still a veteran senior wide receiver. He understands the game. Those guys are self-sustainable. They don't need all of this attention. They don't need to be walked through when it comes to everything. Meaning that this is going to be a seamless connection between Allar. Again, are there going to be bumps along the way? Are there going to be hiccups? Do you need to build that chemistry early on? Yes, I still stand by that. It's going to be simpler, though, because of what Pena and Hudson and Ross bring in terms of experience. There's not going to be this long extended period trying to build this chemistry, build this rapport. So Allar is going to take another step forward. If you didn't think he had a breakout season a year ago, that's fine. Then this year you can classify his senior season as that true breakout season, if you will. I thought last year's season was the breakout season for him. Much better. Completion percentage was better. Was a lot more efficient. Did he have his best performances in those big games? No. That's where it can be different this year. Take another step forward. He'll have better stats than from a season ago. So just when we got to thinking that, Allar might not have as much of that dual threat capability, well, James Franklin says otherwise. Franklin says that he is alluding to the fact that he will be utilized more as a dual threat option in the offense, and it makes the team better because of it. Now, Pat Kraft shared something huge when it came, literally huge, about Penn State's NIL funds and where that stands. Well, in this day and age of college football, and with the recent news from the House settlement, an update there, it's only great news for Penn State. And I'll tell you more about it coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. You get to download the Gametime app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends and family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize that you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without all the stress. And with the money you save on tickets, you can now splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group of friends to join you. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. And get this, prices on the app actually drop closer to when you get to first pitch or the start of an event. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. And yes, you can find Penn State football tickets over at Gametime. And if you've never been to Beaver Stadium, that's where those clear seat views are a true game changer. You can see your point of view. You're not going to be second guessing yourself. When you buy those tickets, you'll know up front what it's going to look like before you get to the venue. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app, last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Let's talk NIL. And there's two parts of this conversation because one, the House settlement Did it really settle anything? But two, and more importantly, Penn State is in a better position to handle what's not going to be solved over the next 4 to 5 years, that we're going to see more of the same in college football, that it's going to be the wild, wild west, but Penn State is positioned to not be left behind. So Pat Kraft shared, and this is now officially reported by the Penn State Athletic Department, that this university received $164.9 million in gifts from 19,863 donors for the 2024-25 academic year. It is the most successful fundraising year in department history. Okay, that's not entirely NIL related, but this is a step in the right direction. It shows that Penn State has no trouble fundraising. Remember, they are going through a stadium renovation. And a lot of those gifts, if you will, were going towards the stadium renovation. But for a program that seems back and forth, is it a strong NIL program? Are they not? This proves that they can fundraise pretty seamlessly, if I have to say. So this didn't go entire. Imagine that. Imagine that NIL budget of over $100 million. Again, this had to do with a lot of the stadium renovations. But when you factor in that Penn State has the largest living alumni base out of any university, there really isn't much of an excuse for Penn State football to not be one of the strongest players in the NIL sphere. I mean, you see it with Penn State hockey going and getting a player like Gavin McKenna and how much NIL money he is allegedly going to be making. NIL is an interesting topic because it's about who are the biggest spenders in all of the sports. And we know that Penn State's competition is not going to play fair. They're not going to play nice with this. If they have money, they're going to spend it. And Penn State needs to understand that. I think they understand that. But what this proves is that Penn State shouldn't have any issues going forward when it comes to funding and raising NIL. That if you can collect that much money and you have what the university is allowed to spend with roughly $20.5 million to all of the varsity sports, Penn State football is going to get about $16.5 million, give or take. Well, other schools are certainly going to have a large NIL fund. So Penn State needs to be prepared for that. And that's what that information proves, is that they can be a big player in the wild, wild west of college football. Look, I don't like it any more than anybody else does. I'm sure that Oregon does, or the SEC schools, that this is going to carry on, that there's been no clarification. There have been no rules set for what is too much when it comes to spending in college athletics. So now universities get to pay that $20.5 million to its athletic programs. Again, most football programs are going to receive $16 million, give or take, to spend. And that's not going to change. That's not going to change for quite some time. It'll be a few years before they finally get that settled, and even still lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. Who decides how much a college player should or shouldn't be making in any sport? It's not just football. It's basketball. It's softball. It's baseball. It's hockey. You name it. How does somebody say that, well, that's not actually their market value? Is that true? So I don't know that I certainly don't like it any more than anybody else, because a school is always going to be relevant if they have a massive checkbook. There's never going to be a true regression, a true rebuild. They are always going to be relevant, and you can identify whatever school that is. I would say that this applies to schools like Texas Tech. That if they have the funds to be able to do it, I'm just saying Penn State's in a better position to handle that. to handle the schools that aren't afraid to spend money, that aren't bad, that are really good at fundraising. And they're always going to be somewhat relevant, somewhat competitive, because they're able to go and spend the money necessary to build that competitive team. So it's not about coaching. It's not about development so much. You get the best players. They're going to be at least decent. They're going to be at least above average. Culture, coaching, all of that still matters. That's why I like what Penn State's coaching staff is. And we're going to talk about that in the final segment, because James Franklin basically alluded to the fact that this is the best team that he's ever had in his tenure for more reasons than just the roster. But with that being said, there's always going to be schools that aren't going to be built organically, that they're going to rely on NIL, that they're going to rely on spending money. And I'm saying that, well, if Penn State can generate this kind of fundraising, it's not going all to the NIL fund, and that's fine. But it shows that there's an initiative, that the donors are out there. Almost 20,000 donors? Almost 20,000 individual donors made contributions. Some of that is NIL, some of that's stadium renovations, some of that's just donating to the athletic program in general, because Penn State has 30 plus varsity sports. It's not all just about football. But they're in a good position to go up against the likes. They're in a better position to go up against the likes of Oregon, Texas Tech, LSU, Ohio State, Notre Dame. I could name all the schools that are very aggressive players in the NIL sphere. Remember, Penn State, maybe why they lost some of these football recruits this past cycle is because it's expensive to retain a third-year starting quarterback. Drew Allar could have been a first-round pick in this year's draft. Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. Deny Dennis-Sutton, Zachy Wheatley. Paying the rest of your roster, AJ Harris, Tony Rojas, to make sure that anybody that's interested in transferring doesn't, that they don't get outbid for players that seem to be committed to the roster. That costs NIL. To get Amari Campbell and Trevor Payne out of the transfer portal, that costs NIL. So yeah, they took a hit in the recruiting cycle, but this is something we've been consistent here on the show, that Penn State allocated its NIL dollars to the players that are here now as opposed to the future. But then if you look ahead to 2027, you notice how that trend's not continuing. Keemon Spell, top 10 player in the nation. Khalil Taylor, top 30 player in the nation. Leighton Von Brandt, top 50 player in the nation. Already all committed to Penn State. That's going to take NIL money to be able to do that. To go get all three potential five-star players committed this early in the 2027 cycle. Notice how that trend didn't continue, that this was just for 2026. So as the stadium renovations continue to wrap up, as that gets paid off, that base of donors that Penn State has can now focus all the assets to one thing, making the athletic teams, the teams themselves, that much more competitive. James Franklin alluded to the fact that this is not only one of the best rosters that he's had during his tenure, this is the best team, period. Best personnel. What that means for a national title. That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. James Franklin said it himself. This is the best personnel that he's ever had during his tenure at Penn State. That is high praise. And it's one thing to say, hey, this is the best roster. These are the best players that I've had. The best personnel. So that includes your quarterbacks, your running backs, wide receivers, your offensive line. You get my point, the roster. It also includes who's coaching, who's helping you. I mean, this coaching staff is top 3 in the country conservatively and has a case to be number 1 overall. James Franklin is head coach. Jim Knowles is your defensive coordinator. Jim Knowles is objectively a top 3 DC, conservatively. I think he's the number one DC in the entire country. Andy Kotelnicki, conservatively, is a top 5 OC. That's the best coordinator duo in the entire country. Jim Knowles and Andy Kotelnicki, find me a better one. Probably can't, or you can find, or it's a 1A, 1B situation where to each their own. But Andy Kotelnicki and Jim Knowles are still up there. And then you lose J1 Sider. That's a big loss. And to Notre Dame, too. You go out and hire Stan Drayton. Stan Drayton's been a part of national title teams. So it's those coaches that are strong and at the best at their respective positions. Andy Kotelnicki being one of the best OCs, Jim Knowles being one of the best DCs, Stan Drayton being one of the best running backs coaches, and what they bring in terms of experience too. I could continue to go through them if you'd like me to. Deion Barnes and Dan Connor and Anthony Poindexter at safeties, Terry Smith. Guys that have been around the highest levels of football, have been coaching for long periods of time. But I think what is truly different about this staff is the experience factor. Stan Drayton being around some of the most competitive teams, some of those former national title contending teams at Ohio State. He brings over that head coaching experience. Now, granted, he wasn't that successful at Temple, but he has the head coaching experience. Jim Knowles has been doing this for a long time. He has head coaching experience, but he's been a part of national title contending teams at Ohio State. Phil Troutwine, the continuity, the consistency for Penn State. So there wasn't all this, the overhaul that did happen, Tom Allen being replaced by Jim Knowles. You're not starting over. You're reloading with what Knowles is adding to the staff. So yeah, you still have people that are fairly green. I think Danny O'Brien, now he's in a better spot than he was 2 years ago. Same thing with Deion Barnes. But that's the difference, is they have the experience. They've all been to that college football playoff semifinal, and instead of them jumping to a new destination, a new job, they get a promotion, they stayed. And then you added 2 figures in Jim Knowles and Stan Drayton that only make the staff better, that just, the great minds, they all work together. And then you add assistants like a Greg Gattuso, former Penn State player, and I think that was something else that's important that I've made this point on the show before, that James Franklin always tries to prioritize getting former Penn State players back on staff. Trace McSorley now as an analyst. You have Deion Barnes, as I've mentioned, Dan Connor, as I've mentioned. Terry Smith has been here for a long time. So you have this nice balance of people that have been outside of the program that picked up tons of useful experience, and then just the diehards that are committed to Penn State, to Happy Valley, that would do anything for the university. That helps. You need that kind of chemistry to build together, that people that are just, they'll go to the ends of the earth for Penn State and the football program, and then the people that, yeah, sure, they have some different motivations, if you will, right? Phil Troutwine's not a Penn State guy. Anthony Poindexter isn't a Penn State guy. But they're really good at what they do, and they like working alongside James Franklin. So Penn State has this now. And that is why it is okay to say that it is national title or bust. Because when you have the third-year starting quarterback who did not transfer in, 2 superstars at running back in Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, 80% of your starting offensive line returns, the defensive stars that you brought back in Zachy Wheatley, Dennis-Sutton, Zane Durant. Potential breakout stars in A.J. Harris. Guys that are teetering on that, hey, this is a good veteran player, to, oh, these are superstar players. A.J. Harris, Tony Rojas. In conjunction to what you have with how strong this staff is and this coordinator duo, Andy Kotelnicki and Jim Knowles, it might be the only season that they have this. Capitalize on it. Maximize it. That's why you can say it's national title or bust, because I don't know that Penn State's going to have this kind of situation again for 4 or 5 years, and that's impossible to project. That is impossible to project because of the transfer portal, and you don't know what you're going to have with current recruits that are still in high school. You don't know how good they are truly going to be. You can only try to project them. So this is James Franklin's best setup, and we'll see if they follow through with it. And that's where we'll wrap things up on this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, a bonus episode, but it's a full episode because we have things that we can actually discuss and analyze, tangible news. It's great. We're 1 month away from college football, 5 weeks away from Penn State's first game against Nevada. I'm excited for it, and we're going to talk about it all here on Locked On Nittany Lions. This is your go-to place for your daily source of all things Penn State sports, football, basketball, wrestling, recruiting, you name it. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us a part of your regular routine. If you're not an everydayer, become one. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts for those daily conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams.